Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it so casually, I almost thought I misheard her. Stop acting like a teenager begging for intimacy. The words dropped between us like a glass breaking on tile. We were sitting on the couch, the glow from Netflix flickering across her face. She didn't even look up from her phone. I remember the light from the screen reflecting in her eyes, cold and distant. I didn't argue. I just went quiet. That was the moment something inside me shut off. I'd spent years building things, bridges, machines, systems that held under pressure. But nothing had prepared me for the silence that followed her words. She stood up, stretched, and walked away, leaving the faint scent of her Bath and Body Works lotion in the air. I stayed there, staring at the paused movie, realizing she hadn't touched me in weeks. Not even a hand on my shoulder. A few days later, I picked her up from Planet Fitness after her shift. She was laughing with someone. One of the new trainers, I think his name was Josh. Younger, loud, the kind of guy who flexes more than he listens. She introduced us with a smirk, like testing how much I'd take before reacting. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I just nodded and opened the door for her. That night she talked about how some men just lose their spark, her voice sugar-coated, pretending it was a joke. I didn't laugh. Instead, I started getting up earlier, going for runs before sunrise in my old Nike shoes. Not to prove something, just to feel movement again, to remember I was still capable of change. She noticed the shift, but didn't mention it. Her focus stayed on her phone, her followers, her gym stories. I watched her reflection in the mirror as she filmed herself stretching, every move a performance for someone unseen. The last thing she said that week was, "You're getting quiet again." I just smiled, grabbed my keys, and walked out to my truck. The cold air felt cleaner than the apartment had in months. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I stopped trying to fix something that was never broken, just unappreciated. And when I drove away, I realized silence wasn't retreat. It was the beginning of strategy. It was a Thursday when I noticed the first real crack. I came home from work and saw her car still in the driveway, but the apartment was empty. The lights were on, music was playing from her phone, and her gym bag was gone. I didn't call. I just sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the empty Chick-fil-A cup she'd left beside the sink. That was her thing. Fast, messy, distracted living. She used to laugh when I'd clean up after her, calling me the quiet husband with builder hands. Now, even my presence felt like background noise to her. That night, she came home later than usual. Her hair was damp from a shower, but not from ours. I noticed the faint scent of men's deodorant mixed with her perfume. She smiled too quickly, like a performer hitting her mark. I didn't say a word. I learned long ago that silence draws out the truth faster than confrontation. The next morning, I left early, stopped by Home Depot on the way to work. I bought wood, bolts, and a set of tools I didn't need, at least not for construction. I needed a space to rebuild myself. I cleared out the garage that weekend and turned it into a small studio, a workshop where I could think, breathe, and design again. She never asked what I was making. I think she assumed it was just another one of my quiet projects. Meanwhile, her world grew louder. The gym selfies, the constant stories, the playful captions that weren't meant for me anymore. I saw her new coworker comment on one of them, something about how she made 6 a.m. look good. She replied with a heart emoji. I stared at it for a long time before turning off my phone. I didn't explode. I didn't demand answers. I started changing the rhythm instead. No more waiting up. No more checking in. I ate dinner alone, left early, spoke less. She didn't realize it yet, but I was already gone, just moving in slow motion. When she finally noticed, it would be too late. Because I wasn't trying to win her back. I was building the version of myself she could no longer reach. The proof didn't come in a dramatic way. It was small, ordinary, like everything before it. A missed call, a notification, a pattern that no longer fit. I wasn't looking for anything, but when her iPhone lit up on the counter, the preview said enough. A message from Josh. "You left your water bottle again. Guess I'll keep it hostage." That wasn't how coworkers talked. I stared at the screen for a second, then turned it face down. That was all I needed. That night, she came home glowing, wearing a new hoodie with the Planet Fitness logo on it. She tossed her bag onto the couch, grabbed her phone, and scrolled through her notifications, pretending not to see me. I asked how her day was. She said, busy. You wouldn't understand. That line hit harder than the text. Because she was right. I didn't understand how someone could destroy something sacred just to prove a point. Instead of reacting, I went out to the garage. My hands found rhythm again, measuring, cutting, sanding. I built shelves, small frames, a wooden desk that would later become my new workspace. Every piece of wood felt like a fragment of control I was reclaiming. I didn't listen to music. I wanted to hear the sound of progress. Over the next week, the distance became visible. She'd laugh at her phone across the room, whispering quick replies before turning the screen away. I'd catch the faint sound of his name in her conversations, disguised as gym talk. I said nothing. Silence became my language. When she started dressing differently for work, new leggings, more makeup, I didn't comment. She was performing, not living. And every performance needs an audience. I just decided to stop being one. On Friday, I saw them together. I'd gone to pick her up like always, parked outside the gym, and watched through the glass. She was talking to him, standing too close, laughing too hard. He put his hand on her shoulder. She didn't move it away. I didn't stay long. I drove off before she noticed me. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I stayed in the garage, sitting in the quiet I had built with my own hands. It wasn't anger keeping me awake. It was clarity. Something was ending, but not me. I disappeared on a Tuesday. No warning, no explanation. I just stopped showing up. My phone stayed silent on the counter, the cards deactivated, the apartment key left in the drawer by the door. She didn't realize it until that evening, when she came home from the gym and found the silence waiting for her. I imagined her walking through the rooms, calling my name, seeing the empty space where my toolbox used to be. The Netflix profile with my name was gone too. I deleted it that morning. It wasn't revenge, it was release. I drove until the city lights disappeared in the rearview mirror. The road felt endless, but clean. I didn't plan where I was going. I just needed distance. I ended up 3 hours away, in a small town near the coast. Rented a small garage behind an old house. Started working remotely on a new engineering project. The first night, I slept in my truck with the window cracked, listening to the sound of the waves in the distance. She called 23 times that week. Then texts. Then voice messages that started confident and ended desperate. We need to talk. You're overreacting. Can we just fix this? Her tone cracked with each one. I never responded. The sound of her voice had lost all meaning. Instead, I focused on rhythm. Early mornings. Runs in my Nike shoes until the sun rose. Simple meals. Quiet nights sketching new designs. My hands built what my words never could. A new life that didn't depend on being seen. A month passed before I checked her social media. She'd been posting photos again, trying too hard to look unaffected. Smiling in the gym mirror, surrounded by people who didn't know what she'd lost. But I did. Because behind every forced smile, I could see the absence of control. She'd built her world on being watched, and now, the one person who truly saw her was gone. I didn't disappear out of pain. I vanished because I'd finally remembered who I was before her noise. And that silence, my silence, was louder than any goodbye. Revenge never crossed my mind. But truth has a way of finding people who try to bury it. 2 weeks after I left, a former coworker of hers reached out, said something strange was going on at Planet Fitness. Apparently, the trainer she'd been spending time with wasn't even certified. He'd faked credentials, borrowed someone else's license number. The gym was investigating quietly. I didn't respond, but a small part of me knew what to do with that information. I didn't have to lift a finger. Just sent an anonymous tip through the gym's complaint portal, attaching a few screenshots I'd saved from their posts together. Nothing malicious, just the truth. A week later, his account disappeared. Then her smiling photos with him vanished too. The silence online told me everything. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on my work. My new project was with a renewable energy startup, designing structural supports for offshore turbines. Long hours, steady pay, clear goals. It was the kind of order I'd been missing. Every night I'd come back to the small garage, wipe the sawdust off my hands, and feel centered. There was no one watching me, no one needing validation. Just progress. Then one evening, I saw her name pop up in my inbox. The subject line read, "Please." No message inside, just a photo of her sitting in her car outside the gym. She looked tired, makeup fading, eyes heavy. It didn't look like guilt. It looked like confusion. like someone who couldn't understand how losing attention could hurt more than losing love. I closed the email and didn't reply. That weekend, word spread online about the trainer's suspension. The gym community turned fast. Whispers, jokes, quiet distancing. She became part of the gossip cycle she used to lead. A colleague had written, "You really thought no one would notice?" I didn't celebrate it. I didn't even smile. I just went back to my plans, the next morning run, the next build. Because somewhere between her chaos and my silence, I found something she couldn't touch anymore. Peace that didn't need witnesses. News travels fast in small circles, especially ones built on mirrors. Within a month, her world started folding in on itself. The gym dropped the trainer quietly, then cut her classes in half, until the schedule stabilizes. Her clients began canceling sessions. The same women who used to laugh with her in group workouts stopped tagging her in posts. It wasn't scandal, it was silence. The kind that eats at people who live off being seen. One of her old friends, Jenna, reached out to me through Facebook. She said, "You really thought no one would notice?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. People were already piecing things together. Every performance eventually ends when the audience leaves. From where I was, I didn't see her fall. I felt it. The messages started again. Not angry now, just scattered. "I miss how calm you were. You always made things make sense. Can we just talk?" But she never said sorry. That was the difference. It wasn't regret, it was absence. She didn't know who to be without someone watching. My life, on the other hand, had found rhythm. Mornings with runs by the ocean. Lunch breaks in the garage, working on a prototype for a design that might land a patent. I'd grab Chick-fil-A on the way back, sit on the tailgate of my truck, and watch the wind move through the fields. No noise, no drama, just clarity. She tried to recreate control online. New photos, motivational captions, reposts about self-worth. But even through the filters, I could see it, the hollowness behind the smile. When someone builds their value on attention, losing it feels like losing oxygen. I didn't need to say a word. My silence became the mirror she couldn't escape. People around her started seeing it too. The cracks, the tension, the forced laughter. The world she'd built out of validation was crumbling, and for the first time, I wasn't the one holding it up. I wasn't gone. I just stopped showing up in places that didn't value peace. And in that distance, everything she'd used to define herself began to vanish, starting with control. By the time fall came, she was a shadow of the woman I used to know. The confident instructor who lived through other people's eyes now looked smaller in every photo she posted. The captions were louder, the smiles tighter. She was still trying to convince the world that nothing had changed. But everything had. Especially me. I had settled into a quiet rhythm. My garage was no longer just a workspace. It had become a reflection of my new life. Tools perfectly arranged, wood polished, designs pinned neatly on the wall. The calm I'd built there felt unshakable. Evenings were spent watching the sun fade behind the water, not needing music or company. Silence had become a friend, not a punishment. Sometimes I'd see her by accident. The town wasn't big, and once, our paths crossed at a coffee shop near the gym. She walked in, ordered something, then froze when she saw me. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. I just nodded, polite, detached. No anger. No warmth either. She looked like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. When she finally walked away, I could feel her eyes still on me. The silence between us said everything words couldn't. A week later, she messaged again. "You've changed. You seem untouchable." I didn't answer, because she was right. I had changed. Not into someone new, but back into who I was before I started shrinking myself to make her comfortable. Her circle was gone now. The friends, the trainer, the attention, all faded. What remained was the echo of what she'd thrown away. She wanted the spotlight, but she forgot that without an audience, it just burns empty. I didn't need to teach her a lesson. Life had already started doing that for me. And as I drove home that evening, past the gym lights flickering through the windows, I realized something simple. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't disappearance, it's evolution. Because you can't chase what's already outgrown you. The first real confrontation came on a quiet Sunday morning. I was at a small diner on the edge of town, eating breakfast alone, when she walked in. I didn't recognize her at first. Her energy was gone, replaced by something softer, almost fragile. She saw me before I saw her. She hesitated by the door, then walked over. "You're really not going to talk to me?" she said. Her voice was low, careful, like she was afraid of the sound it might make. I looked up from my coffee, calm. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, but it wasn't cruel. It was final. She sat across from me anyway, uninvited, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to find words. "I made mistakes," she said, "but you just disappeared. You didn't even fight for us." I almost smiled at that, because that's what she never understood. Silence wasn't surrender, it was decision. I didn't argue. I let her talk. She filled the space with apologies, explanations, half-truths. The same performance she used to give the world, only now the audience wasn't buying it. When she finally stopped, I just said, "I didn't disappear. I stopped showing up where I wasn't respected." The sentence hung in the air like a door closing. She looked down, nodded slowly, and said she missed the old me. I told her the old me didn't survive what she did. There was no anger in my tone, just clarity. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. Instead, I finished my coffee, placed a few bills on the table, and stood up. Outside, the air felt colder. I could feel her watching me through the glass as I walked to my truck. She probably expected me to turn around one last time, but I didn't. Because that moment wasn't about punishment, it was about peace. As I drove away, I realized something had shifted for good. She wasn't my story anymore. Just a lesson written in silence. Read only by those who finally understand that sometimes the loudest closure is no closure at all. By winter, she had lost almost everything that once made her feel powerful. The gym kept her on part-time hours. Most of her clients moved on. Even her social media, her stage, had gone quiet. I didn't have to look to know what was happening. People who live for attention always show their downfall in slow motion. The silence around her wasn't mine, it was her own echo. She reached out again a few times, shorter messages now. "I miss who we were. You were right about everything." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. I wasn't cruel, I was done. Sometimes letting someone face the reflection of their own choices is the only justice needed. One evening, I drove past Planet Fitness by accident. Through the glass, I saw her sitting alone at the front desk. No laughter, no crowd. Just her scrolling through her phone with the kind of emptiness that used to live in me. For a second, I remembered everything. The nights on the couch, the silence, her words cutting sharper than knives. But then I remembered who I'd become. That memory no longer hurt, it just existed. My life had grown into something steady. I'd finished the prototype for my project, submitted it for patent review. My runs were longer, my sleep deep. Even the food tasted better when peace was the seasoning. The truck that once carried me away now brought me home, to a place that finally felt like mine. Meanwhile, she was unraveling. Friends told me she'd tried switching gyms, tried starting a fitness blog, but nothing stuck. She wasn't the villain of my story anymore, just someone still trapped in hers. And that realization came with no pleasure, only calm acceptance. That night, as I sat in my garage surrounded by the scent of wood and metal, I understood something I hadn't before. Closure isn't an ending, it's balance. She taught me what emptiness looked like. I taught myself what peace feels like. In the end, her downfall wasn't about betrayal, it was about silence. The same silence she once mocked now surrounded her. And for the first time, she finally understood what it sounds like when someone stops caring. It was almost spring when I saw her again. I was grabbing lunch at Chick-fil-A after a morning meeting, still in my work clothes, when she walked in. She looked different, quieter, smaller somehow. No bright colors, no camera in her hand. Just a woman carrying the weight of everything she'd built and broken. She froze when she saw me, then offered a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked over slowly, almost like approaching a stranger. "You look good," she said. Her voice carried something I hadn't heard from her in years, humility. I thanked her and went back to my food. She hesitated, then sat down across from me, like she couldn't stand the idea of me leaving again without a word. "I never thought you'd actually let go," she said quietly. "I thought you'd wait, like before." I looked at her, calm, steady. "That's because you only knew the version of me that needed to be chosen," I said. "Not the one who learned to choose himself." She nodded, tears building but never falling. For a second, I saw the person she could have been if she hadn't been chasing validation. There was no makeup, no performance, just a woman who finally ran out of control to lose. She said she was sorry, not as a tactic this time, but as confession. And for the first time, I believed her. But belief isn't the same as return. I didn't promise anything. I didn't ask for anything either. I just told her I hoped she found what she'd been searching for, even if it wasn't me. When I stood up to leave, she whispered, "You really changed." I paused, looked at her, and said no. I just stopped being convenient. As I walked to my truck, I caught her reflection in the window, watching me go, eyes full of what-ifs. But the story was over. Not with anger, not with revenge, just silence, the kind that brings peace, not pain. I didn't disappear. I simply stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And somehow, that quiet exit spoke louder than anything I'd ever said. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.